Today we're going to make some chicken parmesan, or more colloquially known as chicken parmesan. I have 2 of these large chicken breasts, and you can turn that into 4 servings pretty easily, but I'm going to make these 2 gargantuan size servings, and I'm going to show you how. So first order of business is getting all of this excess fat cut off or pulled off. There's usually not much to take off of these, so I like to get most of it. Again, I would typically turn each breast into 2 servings. You could easily just cut it in half and then pound that out, and it'd be a large enough serving for 1 person. But I'm just going to tell myself that I'm protein packing or bulking or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, I just want a big piece of fried chicken. So this is something that most American families have. You know, it's a really easy thing to whip up for a lot of people. But the way we had it as kids, my mom didn't really bread these up and fry them like the traditional recipe goes. She kind of just submerged them in the tomato sauce and added cheese on top and then just baked them that way, which I guess was healthier, and it was still, you know, pretty good. But once I started having these at like restaurants and realizing that it's supposed to be like a fried cutlet, I really kind of fell in love with it. And when I was learning how to cook stuff, it's one of the first things I was trying to cook. And I even converted my parents to doing it this way now because I made it for them once, and now this is how they do it. That's a win for me. All right, now that these boys are clean shaven, we're gonna flatten these out. And to do that first, we're gonna butterfly them. And that just means cutting them in half, but not all the way. So you're gonna fold it open, and it's hopefully even on both sides. But even if it's not, that's okay because we're still going to flatten it to make it even. All right, so I'm going to roughly go in there and just try to cut halfway through a slit, and then I'm going to fold it open. You can already tell that it's definitely not even, but that's okay. Now I can show you what to do when it's not. Okay, now I can fold that open, and then you have 2 of these halves, and then I've got a little hole in the middle, but that's okay. Again, I'm trying to get the knife about halfway down, and then I'm cutting almost to the end, just like a hinge at the bottom, like a hot dog bun or something. Okay, very good. All right, there's 2 ways that you can attack flattening these. You could just cover them in plastic wrap and pound them until they're as thin as you'd like. But what a lot of people do is they continue to make slices so it keeps folding over itself. So I'm going to do a little bit of that first. Just kind of making sideways slices here so I can open it further, and it's going to be even thinner as you do that. So I'm just making kind of really shallow slits so that I can open another layer of the chicken breast, and I cut through at that time. Again, that's okay because when we bread this and fry it, it's going to stay cohesive. It's just going to make the pounding job a little bit easier, but if you just want to go straight to Pound Town, then you can. Okay, I think that's good enough. I'm going to do these one at a time because they're going to be really big when they're done being flattened. So I'm starting with some plastic wrap. If these came out of a vacuum sealed bag, I would just use that because it's already been used. Cover that nicely to prevent making a mess. And I'm going to use this meat mallet here. I feel like almost every YouTuber says they don't have a meat mallet for whatever reason, and they just use like a pan or their fist or something, but I do have one. I'm gently just hitting this as I kind of spread it outwards from the middle. I don't want to destroy it, so just be gentle but, you know, firm at the same time. You hit it too hard and too flat, you'll crush it, and you don't want to do that. You're just trying to spread it out among itself. I'd say that's about a 1/2 inch or maybe just a little thinner, which is perfect. You don't want it too thin because you're going to lose all the juice. Okay, I'm going to stick that on my wire rack and then repeating with the second breast. Got some holes in it, but again, when you bread this, it's going to be okay. And again, and you could go thicker than this. I just like it this thin because more surface area means more crispy edges and more places that you can cover in cheese at the end. Okay, and truly on brand for me, I'm doing this a day in advance because I like spreading my workout, but you could definitely do this the day of. You could even do this on a weeknight. It'd be really easy. But if you do have the time and you don't like doing your entire meal at once, which I typically like to have a step a day ahead, it's a really good idea to dry brine your meat just with some salt overnight, especially if you're frying it and you want it to be crispy. Just adding a generous portion of salt to each one of these. Since they're so thin, I should only need to do one side. It'll penetrate enough to the other side. If it was like a thicker steak, I would season both sides because they would be more even that way. But again, you're not going to have a bad product if you just season these and then bread them and cook them right away. I just like how they dry out the skin, but it's going to keep the inside moist. These don't have skin, but the outside layer of them is going to dry out, which is going to help them to fry up very crispy when you eat them. You know what? I'm going to season both sides just because I want to. If you covered one side in salt, then it would be too much to try to season the other side. Like if I season one side like I season one side of a steak, it would be too much just because of how thin these are. But I'm doing it sort of generous, but also sort of conservative. Okay, and I have these on a wire rack because I want them to stay dry on the bottom. They're going to release water with the salt that's on them. That would just pool on the bottom of them. If I didn't have this, this is going to help them to stay aerodynamic as they sit in the fridge overnight. I'm going to go to bed. All right, it's tomorrow. Before getting back to the chicken, I'm going to start by making my tomato sauce. As you see here, I have a few strips of bacon that I'm just going to dice up a good bit. I've seen a lot of people online make their tomato sauces with a bacon base, and I've never actually tried it myself, but I think it's a great addition. Just going to add fat to the bottom of it and smoky, porky meat flavor, which is never bad. So I'm kind of semi-diced. These are pretty warm pieces of bacon. They've sat out at room temperature for a bit. If you freeze them, they're a lot easier to cut, but this is okay. And the rule is cold pan to start your bacon, but I say room temperature is fine, so that's what I'm going with. Starting on a medium-low heat and just gonna let that render out. And I'm only making 2 portions of chicken, but I'm gonna make enough sauce to account for a 28-ounce can of tomatoes, so I can have some left over and be fine. In the meantime, I'm gonna get the rest of my sauce ingredients ready, which is one of these small yellow onions. It's already starting to brown up and crisp up. If you watch me, you've probably noticed that I've uploaded a lot less frequently, and I don't upload that frequently to start with. I mean, back in the day, I was doing a video 7 days a week, you know, mostly shorts, but once a week I would have my long video, which my long form videos are still my priority. And earlier this year, I was doing really well with getting 1 out a week. You know, my shorts kind of fell off, but I was focusing on, you know, 1 long form a week. But I've just become extremely busy, mainly with work, but just a few other things in life. And I've also had some, you know, minor financial struggles, so this YouTube thing's kind of taken a back seat, which is okay because, you know, I have other priorities to focus on. This is just something for fun. But that being said, I'm not saying this because I'm quitting or planning on dialing back long term. I would still love to make a video a week as a goal, even though it doesn't always happen. It's just I got to get through some hurdles first. Status check. It's almost where we need it to be. Just stir it around and make sure it's even. I'm also going to crush up and chop up a few cloves of garlic here. 3 is fine. You could go more if you want. But yeah, once your bacon is looking like this, nice and crispy, you can add in the onions and begin sauteing those. That'll lower the temp of the pan, and also they'll release water, so it'll prevent everything from burning. Make sure you scrape off anything you see on the bottom using the water that the onions release. But yeah, on that cooking content front, I am still making more videos, but I'm kind of making some for this meat sponsor that I've done in the past. I have been making videos on the side for them, but I kind of stopped for a while. They've recently reached out with more opportunities, and you know, because this YouTube channel doesn't really benefit me financially yet, it's been slow on that front. This is just a better option to work for them. So that's gonna, you know, take away some of my weekends and my ability to make my own long form videos. And because of the other financial stuff that I'm going through, it's just a good option for me to do in the meantime. So I hate to say I'm making less videos for those that do actually watch these pretty regularly, but I do want to explain why I'm not in exactly the same capacity as I have been. So there is that. All right, once this has been going for like 6 or 7 minutes, we can move on to the next step. You don't need this caramelized. I probably took it farther than it needs to be. I'm gonna add in my garlic and saute that until it's fragrant, so for about a minute. All right, as a last step, I'm gonna add some of this tomato paste. I don't think I'll ever make a tomato sauce without this. Just a couple of tablespoons. It gives that concentrated tomato flavor, and if you add it in before deglazing, it'll really toast up at the bottom of the pan and have that much more depth of flavor. I meant to add this in with the onions. This is just some red pepper flakes for some spice. You need to toast those up before it's deglazed as well. And I think it would be fine to just deglaze with the tomatoes. There's enough water in there. But for some more flavor, I'm gonna add in a little bit of white wine. I like to add this with tomato sauces and stuff like that. The alcohol, of course, burns off, but it just leaves behind a little bit more of a note of flavor that I think is enjoyable. Definitely optional if you want to leave it out. Just the tomatoes is fine. That's a really dark and toasty base. You could probably take it a little less than I did, but as long as it's not burnt, it's okay. I'm opening a 28-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes Most people recommend the San Marzano style of tomato, which is fine. And I prefer that as well. I think it does taste a little better, but it is more expensive. So I'm just using this Walmart brand of non-San Marzano tomatoes. So first I'm gonna pour this juice off. It should keep my pan from burning. And now these are whole like plum tomatoes, or I guess Roma tomatoes. Instead of adding them in, I'm going to crush them with my hands so that it's, you know, less chunky. Just try to break this up fairly good. If you have a blender or an immersion blender, you can skip this step, or you know, you can further blend it after this, but I think it'll be fine for our uses with these little tomato chunks in it. I would use an immersion blender. Jeez. I would use an immersion blender, but mine is broken and I don't feel like cleaning my full blender for this. Jeez, this will definitely make a mess. It just got on my couch. Wonderful. Be careful when you're squeezing these. I need to go clean my couch like stat before that color sets in. How in the world did it get that far? Usually not this juicy. Yeah, my couch is not far from my island, so I guess it's in the danger zone. It's what you get for having a living room and the kitchen in the same room. Okay, I'm gonna clean my couch and then let this reduce, and I'll be back after I clean up. All right, the sauce is simmering behind me. I'm just gonna stir that every so often. And we're gonna move on. The next thing I'm gonna do is prep my cheese. And this is the titular ingredient. This is Parmigiano Reggiano, as you can see by the rind on the side. It's the official stuff, and I only recommend using this for recipes like this. It's pretty expensive, but it's very worth it in terms of the taste that it brings compared to just the regular store-bought brands. I'm gonna be using this on the cheese coating on the chicken along with some mozzarella, but I'm also gonna put this in the breadcrumb mix just to have it on the part that's being fried. I don't know exactly how much I'm gonna use. I'm just gonna make a handful out of this, and you'll see me put some type of estimate at the bottom in the description. I'm also doing this on the fine side of a box grater, not the feather side, which is what I think this thing is called, but I'm going on this side, I don't know. Small holes. All right, I think that's a good handful for 2 chicken breasts. All right, and here are the chickens after resting overnight. You can see the outside has dried out nicely, so we can get ready to bread these and fry them up. So I'm gonna fill my pan here with some canola oil to get that frying, or to get that heated up before frying. I'm gonna use my candy thermometer because I'm unashamed to admit I rely on technology. It's also a good time to start boiling some water because I'm gonna cook some pasta. So I've got a 3-stage breading station here. I'm gonna leave the first one for flour empty because I'm gonna do that when the chicken's on the plate. The second one is going to be the egg wash. I would say 2 eggs for 2 chicken breasts like this, but I have some leftover egg wash from a king cake that I made last night, and it's gonna do, I'm budgeting, so I gotta cut corners where I can. And lastly, purists would say not to do this, but I'm not a purist. I just buy these Italian style breadcrumbs from the store, and I think they work fine for chicken parm. You should use panko breadcrumbs or just regular breadcrumbs that you season yourself. But again, I think this is fine. It's pre-seasoned. If you're gonna do it yourself, I would just do panko or regular breadcrumbs with Italian seasoning and whatever other stuff you wanna stick in there. So what I'm gonna do is finish seasoning my chicken breast with some pepper since it's already salted. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle flour over one side and try to press that in so I'm not dunking it in flour. I don't think I need that much. See if I can spread that around. And I'll do the same on the other side with some pepper. All right, and once you get the excess off, into the eggs. Just make sure that's fully coated on both sides, of course. Same thing, drop off the excess, and then we're gonna go into the breadcrumbs. Quick break because the water is boiling, so I'm gonna salt it and add my pasta. I'm using angel hair because that's what I like. But back in my chicken, I'm just gonna cover the top with breadcrumbs and then press all that in. Just make sure that all your crevices have breadcrumbs, and then you can set this aside. I'm gonna bread up my other one, and then once the oil's hot, we can start frying. All right, I'm not bringing my camera over here, but the pasta is done. I'm gonna drain this. And then something I like to do, and you might have seen me do this sometimes before, but when I finish pasta, I like to put a little bit of butter in it. 1, it'll just taste better, but 2, it kind of helps it stop from sticking because the butter has fat in it and it'll help lubricate everything. Just a tablespoon or 2 will do. And then this can sit while we finish everything else. All right, now this oil is sitting at about 375 Fahrenheit, which is perfect for frying. I want the chicken to fry around 350, which it'll drop to once I add it in. But I absolutely forgot to add the Parmesan cheese to the breadcrumbs, of course. So I'm gonna try to add some of this. It's probably not gonna stick well, but we're gonna add most of it afterwards. when we add the mozzarella to it. Always forgetting something, and I'm only 30 years old. So of course I'm gonna do these one at a time because they're gonna take up the entire saucepan. Just gently lay the bottom in and slowly go all the way to the top. Make sure it's going away from you. And again, the pot will help it to form into the shape that it wants to be, even though it's separated at the bottom. Yeah, you can see that most of the cheese has basically just come out of the oil. I'm gonna make sure to flip it because the bottom is touching the bottom of the pan and I don't want it to get too brown. But all you're looking for is to get nice golden brown, breading around the whole thing. And don't worry about cooking the inside because we're gonna bake it with the cheese and it'll definitely cook through at that point. I think it'll probably reach close to temperature in here because of how thin it is. That was only a couple minutes and I've got really good browning, so I'm gonna pull it at that point. I'm gonna let that oil come back to temperature before we add this second one in. All right, in with breast number 2. We will gently flip it after a minute or so. I think after 2 minutes, once again, we've got perfect browning. Love that. Just be careful not to break off the breading on the outside with the tongs. Before we cheese up the breast and melt that, I do have this sauce that has reduced quite a bit, so I'm gonna finish that here. The tomato chunks are more evident, so I'm gonna try to break those up with a masher. Again, blending is the way to go for this, but I just don't feel like cleaning it. This is even a little thinner than I would like, so I reduced it too much, so I'm gonna add in a little bit more of that white wine. Let's get this on heat to cook the alcohol off, but also add enough to make it thinner. Also gonna finish by seasoning with some salt and pepper because we have not seasoned and tomatoes need a good bit of salt. I have just a pinch, maybe a couple teaspoons of sugar to counteract the acidity of the tomatoes. Love that in my tomato sauce. Finally, just a couple of glugs, maybe a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil, just for richness. And all you need to do is taste this for seasoning and just finish with enough salt. It's very good. It tastes kind of like pepperoni pizza because of the bacon that's in there. Really underrated thing to do with tomato sauce. Just need a bit more salt, and I think that's good to go. All right, last step is to get some mozzarella cheese on top of these so we can bake that and melt it, and then we have our final dish. I'm using whole milk, not low moisture, but it's not like in water mozzarella. It's just this Walmart brand that I think is perfect for this application. I just need to make a few thin slices, not too thick because when it browns, I want it to be melted, so not the middle being, a full chunk. That was not what I was trying to do. That's okay. And there we go, a full slice, and we'll just do a couple of those. I have my oven set to 400 Fahrenheit, and it's been preheating while I've been doing this. And then we're just gonna add this in so it can brown up. Should just take a few minutes. Some people opt to not put sauce on top of the crispy chicken because it'll sog it up, but I don't mind. There's enough crispy edges on the outside. I'm not gonna cover the entire thing. I just like the presentation of seeing the sauce and then the cheese on top of that. Stuff is gonna be amazing. Now this time I'm not gonna forget my Parmesan cheese. I'm gonna add a good layer of that on top of the marinara. Now we can add our slices of mozzarella. I kind of like how the mozzarella shields the Parmesan because that would burn in the oven. The mozzarella is going to melt nicely. Parmesan doesn't melt really nicely on its own. So I'm going to stick this in my 400-degree oven and then we'll be done. And here's how they look after about 10 minutes in the oven. They are melted but not browned. So here's what I'm going to do to fix that. You could easily just turn the broiler on, but I have this, so I'm going to put it to use. Guess which one's gonna be my thumbnail? Starting with some beautiful angel hair pasta. I'm gonna give that some of its own sauce. And then this beautiful chicken parm cutlet. Wow, that is quite a portion. Since I have this extra parm, I'm gonna dust the top with it. Always. Finally, something I'm not making for the first time when I shoot a video for it. I often like to try new things on this channel and it's a good excuse to make a video out of it. But this is something I've been eating and even making for years. I love it. Most people in the world love it. It's really popular for a reason. I don't need to say much, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut right in. Get a little bit of sauce, cheese, and chicken in one bite. Cheers. It's still hot from the oven. I rarely get to eat food that's still hot because of all the pictures I have to take. That's amazing. I mean, this dish doesn't need much explanation because most people, especially in the States, have tried it. Everyone probably does it a little bit their own way. I think this way is the best way I've ever done it. I mean, a fried chicken cutlet, any way you do it is gonna be great, but I think a lot of power rests in that tomato sauce, especially making it with bacon like I did. Make sure it's seasoned well, and it's really gonna contribute to this dish in the best way. I used to love buttered noodles as a kid, and these are kind of plain because I haven't mixed it around. Nostalgia. I don't know how long this one's gonna be, but I assume it's gonna be pretty long compared to my regular videos. I included a lot of steps in the cooking process for this because I did it live. I've done other live videos like this in recent months, but I've kind of cut them down really short to make them more like my other videos. I don't know if this is too monotonous, but please let me know if you'd like it to be more concise. I know I don't have much of a personality and I'm not really an entertainer, so I like those shorter videos that are to the point personally, but I would definitely love to hear what you think. But I hope to see y'all soon. I do want to continue making videos pretty regularly, but I just want to kind of warn you that things are kind of happening, so I just don't know how sporadic I'm going to be, especially for the next few months. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you all for watching. Be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Oops. It's like a chicken parm tendy.